Well, hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Eating Peace this week. I have several things to talk about, and I want to be as concise as possible. One of the most important things that happens in compulsion of any kind, as part of that cycle, that merry-go-round cycle that we're familiar with, is wanting to put a lid on it, keep things a secret, tuck things away, put it under the rug, lock it in the closet. All these different metaphors we have for not expressing what feels genuinely true to us. And the word secret. And we will try very, very hard to change these negative thoughts and change the negative experience, and also put a lid on our secrets, not share them, for really important reasons often. Reasons like thinking that those other people will be appalled and upset and disturbed by what we're sharing, that they'll have a changed view of us, and that ultimately I will be abandoned, I will be rejected, I will be alone. It kind of boils down to this, like, what's the worst that could happen? I love that question that I learned in the work. What's the worst that could happen if people knew my secret? And it is usually something to do with being abandoned, rejected, and alone. But I want to share with you that I wanted to keep my secret of having an eating disorder, yes, when I was actively having one, but for like a decade after my last bulimic episode. Seriously, that was a long time. So I was thinking just the other day that probably 10 years after my last bulimic episode, I began to be a little more just sharing, divulging sometimes that this was something I had recovered from, and that had been really quite brutal. And I had very dear friends, close friends, that knew about it. My family certainly did. And I had been hospitalized and had really 10 years of just horrendous, probably life-threatening experiences back and forth and up and down around disordered eating. And, made it through. Obviously, here I am today. But I just felt so ashamed and disgusted by binge eating, especially. It was almost as if I had a kind of a high spot for self-starvation. There was something that took so much control and effort, and there was like a perfection kind of thing in it that was almost beyond just simple disordered eating. And the binge aspect of eating, which would always come if I ever starved myself, there would always be a rebellion, grabbing, desperation that would flip to the other side. So that would come at some point. And I would always feel ashamed about that, like I gave in or gave up or fell off the wagon or lost control. That's what we say about that, isn't it? And this can show up. I had extreme versions where it was just the volumes of food being consumed and then forcing myself to vomit, or forcing myself to be in a gym for 3 hours, or to run 10 miles, or exercise half the day, or that kind of orientation, real extreme flip-flop, is really what goes on a more minor level inside people who just kind of gain and lose 10 pounds, or always feel like they need to get their snacking under control. It's kind of funny. I know that the shame and depth of feeling like you're threatening your own life or playing with your body or the mindset in some way is not the same. It's not on the scale of 0 to 10. It is just not the same level potentially, but there's some of the same exact thoughts. I should be different. I want to be different. I'm a bad person. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't control myself or my feelings. And then I need to crack down on it. And I've talked a lot about that, even in the last video. That comes up often. But what about this side? So even the person that has a minor kind of play in the world of compulsion around when it comes to food and eating, still has a sense often of wanting to hide the moments of being out of control, or the fact that they've gained weight, or not showing their body to the world. I feel ashamed. People are going to look at me. It's going to be awful. My body's so ugly. I don't want them to see my thighs. That was mine all the time. I don't want them to see my thighs. And I'm not sure that wouldn't cross my mind still if suddenly I was presented with a beach, which I would love to go on, a warm beach in a bathing suit. I might have the thought flash through my body that it is being seen by all these people in the atmosphere, right? I'm just sure that would happen. At least we show up and are aware that there's other human beings and eyeballs and people, and here I am too, showing up the way I do, and that there would be a moment of awareness about them seeing me. It's just that something happens when this body orientation becomes so vital and important, where we're wishing that this thing called a body would be ideal so that these people don't judge us and don't criticize and aren't as cruel as we are to our own bodies. It usually just what we think those people are thinking and believing about us usually is what I am thinking and believing, or what I've heard other close people say about others or about me, maybe from childhood. Could be true. But this thing about secrets, let's just talk about secrets. Very interesting that a decade went by and people asked me in an organization that was local I said yes, that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to participate in that. And then was assigned a couple of different schools to do a talk on eating disorders. And it was an entire gymnasium. I was scared out of my mind on the way there, driving there. And then to see all these junior high students and then all the different teachers and adults that were in the gym. And then another place I did it was at a high school with all the teachers and adults listening in as well. And lots of questions. These kids had so many questions. And I felt like almost ashamed to answer some of them. They were like directly asking me, boys and girls too. And I remember having the feeling, I can't really handle this yet. I don't really want to be a spokesperson in the world for eating disorder. Now it makes me chuckle because it turns out part of me is, but it's not all of me. But it is enormously in a field in which I work and do speaking and work with people and have special programs. So what I want to tell you today, it's not really necessarily a secret, but it's interesting. It kind of fits into this pattern, is when I first became certified in the work of Byron Katie, and I went to the school and I began working with people and did the work with people on all kinds of topics. My first teleclass that I created and did a curriculum for was on divorce, not eating. And I work along. And then the next teleclass I did is on parenting, not eating. And I just began to think, I don't know if I'm ever going to work with you. Thank goodness. I know the work and we're just working with people in a general sense here in the world. Perhaps I am never going to work with people on that eating thing. So gross, so disgusting. Glad to be rid of it in my life. We don't need to bring that out into a highlight of something that I know a lot about. And I also felt that it was so big and so discouraging and so difficult because often it's just a symptom of other underlying problems, and so shameful that I thought people have a hard time coming forward. And that's actually, I think, true sometimes. They have a hard time stepping forward and talking about this because it feels very, very shameful. So this will be nothing new to hear. But somewhere along the way, I realized and recognized after enough people asked me, I think I've heard that you recovered from an eating disorder and you've got a bit of experience working with just compulsive behavior of any kind, addictive recovery, could you work with me on, I did more work with people on smoking before I did the work with them on eating, because I also smoked once, and tobacco, and then I quit. And I was less worried about saying that to the world than saying that I was bulimic and anorexic. And it was just very interesting. It was something very shameful. I remember long ago going to Overeaters Anonymous meetings and thinking, oh, this would be so much easier if I was just an alcoholic or a drug addict, because then I'd go to the AA or NA meetings and no problem. There was just something about this compulsion with food and eating that felt very shameful and felt very, very old and very original and very babyish and very immature. So what I just want to say to you all today is, no matter where you've been on that scale of feeling shame for the way you've eaten, there are so many people like us. I think people who are as far as you could imagine from having an eating disorder feel interest and curiosity and maybe some embarrassment, if it's not full-blown shame, about what goes on with food and eating. Because we have this world where there's infinite number of foods and we're kind of hooked up for pleasure. And we like to eat for the most part. And it's really interesting to have these things in the world that are very, very abundant in some cultures and areas. And where many of us live, there's grocery stores and very little farming. And, there's just incredible ease and simplicity, almost strangely so, for accessing this extremely pleasurable thing called eating. So it is not that strange for something like this that's needed. It's even necessary, unlike drugs, alcohol, tobacco, pornography. This is actually needed just to live. So it's not surprising that it's kind of a final frontier or a first place of looking at the dynamics between wanting to be a wonderful person, maybe a perfect person, accepted and liked by other human beings and ourselves, and having that awareness strike us very early, because there's a lot of talk of it even among kids that are 9 years old, how people look and what we remember in school and what kind of outfits people had on or didn't have on and how they showed up. So it's just awareness of all that. So I guess just to say today how little there is really to be shameful of when it comes to food and eating, and that sometimes the resistance to telling our secrets or sharing our concerns about what's going on with food or eating or our bodies or our capacity to engage with food and be pleased and then stop and end and walk away and do other things in the world, and just watching that all happen and how that gets to be off balance is incredibly common. So now, of course, I work with people more and more and more on compulsion and addiction of any kind, and I'm fascinated by it and absolutely love it. So I have a little confession, speaking of keeping secrets and having confessions. I don't know if it quite fits, but it kind of does. With trying to put together a group program for eating peace, given that it brings so much shame and secretiveness and feeling of failure and people feeling ugly and bad about themselves. They kind of come in feeling that. It's like just so common with this particular issue. And so given that that's going on, when I first ever offered the Eating Peace program, there was about 12 or 14 people that signed up, wonderful size group, very beautiful, doing it together online, audio only, not video. Many people that have this issue feel like they don't want to be seen on camera. And if they showed up in a setting with some other human being, they'd want it to be one-on-one, no one else. So There's a lot of issues around feeling safe enough to be in the room or be in the group or be present with others. And so this one program, there's more pre-recorded webinars and sharing and little lessons than I've had in anything else that I do. But I decided after a couple years of doing the Eating Peace program and developing and kind of rewording and rewriting and sharing some of the principal points that we have in Eating Peace or recovery from compulsion at a very deep level. And it's quite extensive, but I decided, you know what? Maybe what we'll do is we'll swing to the other way and we'll just do a massive amount of live inquiry, group inquiry, 5 days a week. The focus will be on live and inquiring, doing the work of Byron Katie, finding, looking at these thoughts, questioning if they're true, wondering who we'd be without the thought, so that we're using our own imagination to see what's so. And so I just way reduced the pre-recorded lessons and the ideas. Let's just get all that information way whittled down and not really focus on that. And we'll do it a different way. And here's what's interesting. Very few people really being engaged. It's almost too much. And I love that one person said, I think this was kind of obsessive, which is so great because what is having any compulsion? It feels very obsessive. It feels intense. It feels driving. And so that's what I've learned. To do 4 to 5 months, whatever it's been, of offering something 5 days a week is really a lot. And it's kind of had some people experience it as like pressure, or they're missing something, or they're missing out if they don't show up at everything. So huge learning. We're not going to do it that often for the next round of Eating Peace. We're going to go back to kind of a more normal flow of gathering in a group, which is you pick which part works for you once a week only. There'll be a morning option and there'll be a late afternoon option Pacific time. You can come to both if you really want to, but you're just going to pick one as your primary place. And you don't even have to be on live calls, because there will be more pre-recorded exercises and journaling and lessons to actually access your own contact and awareness with yourself, because that's what this ultimately is most importantly about. But it is important to share your secrets, to share yourself. So the invitation will be to share in our little private forum or in the little private Facebook group. We'll be picking which one I'm going to be using for this time around. And, to make contact, either do it one-on-one with a partner. If you're familiar with the work, you can wind up pairing with somebody there and following your journaling exercises and sharing and writing in the group, because that would have been much more easy for me to share in writing in a group rather than speaking out loud. And to come and make what works for you actually work for you. And we won't have a heavy emphasis on one particular aspect. All things will be a smorgasbord, which I know has made us nervous when it comes to the work, when it comes to eating, right? You have a smorgasbord and there's too many choices and there's too much abundance, and I don't know what to pick, and I don't know. But one thing we really, really, really learn and practice from the very, very beginning with Eating Peace is how to imagine being in the smorgasbord of life with so much available to us and all that delicious, amazing food. And to just then pick what we want to eat and actually eat it and stop when we're full. To use our own inner sense of connection with our bodies, our feeling sense, our satiation, and to make contact with that thing that starts and stops and starts and stops and has enough, and it gets to be just right. And then hunger is coming, it's time to eat, and then we eat, and then we stop. and the flow, to get into the flow again, because we've usually lost the flow. I had certainly lost the flow extremely when I was really in that raging eating disorder that was so horrendous for me. I had either everything coming in, like all feelings, all the people in my environment. I need to help them all or be connected to them all. I need to do everything. I need to be everywhere. Or I would close up in a little roly pillbug ball and isolate myself in my tiny apartment because I had let way too much in and had everything become too much. So everything about my life, it seemed like every moment, pace to pace moment, was about too much or not enough. And my food and eating reflected that. My beliefs about everything and people, feelings, life. Life is too much. Oh, life is not enough. Constantly. And so this is about kind of pulling in and using your own experience of eating to understand yourself much, much better. It's not about instant cures. It's not about suddenly being on a diet plan, although food plans are not bad in the Eating Peace program if you want to find some kind of structure and you feel like you've been wildly out of control. We do that at the very beginning. There's a whole foundations in the first 2 weeks where we really sit with several important practices that I'll be suggesting or inviting you to do the entire program, like a morning practice, and then some things that you can do just with eating to go to sort yourself out on just how you can enter this, but also knowing that we have no idea what's going to happen and no idea the length of time that's necessary for you to be comfortable, and no idea what needs to occur in your life on this path that seems to be including something off around food and eating. But we get to the heart of it, over and over. We're looping back and getting close to the heart of it. And one of the key things will be to understand the sense of shame and how it's just been trying to keep us safe. Keep those secrets and you'll be safer. Don't say the truth. Don't really share yourself. Don't say what you're feeling and what's going on because you won't be safe. That could be true. You might not be safe. You might have to enter the great mysterious unknown and see how people respond to you if you say the truth, or see how you respond to yourself if you say the truth, and what your real feelings are as you expose them to life. But it's worth it, because holding it all in is miserable. It is absolutely miserable, and it feels really terrible to be all alone in this compulsion, to feel like you're the only person that is such a wacko or so obsessive or so off or so wrong. And what I just like to say over and over again in Eating Peace and with the group that meets is, even if you're just doing it all individually by yourself on your own pace and not really sharing, or if you're sharing a lot, both ways are great. But that just doing the littlest bit more to be in touch with what you're really feeling and expose yourself and let yourself be real. I love how Byron Katie says, argue with reality and you lose, but only 100% of the time. So reality is actually how you're feeling. And if you start with shame, okay, I'm ashamed. That's what the reality is in this moment. Now let's study it. Let's be really curious. Let's hold it with loving attention. Shame has risen up for a reason in this moment. And one of the wonderful things about shame is it's a great little beacon to notice that I'm holding secrets, or I feel less than everyone else. I feel like I'm the worst. So what's one tiny step that I can do to just expose myself, even just a little? You don't have to say it all at once and just flail around and have everything coming out. One little thing to share and open up. So we'll be doing that again here soon in Eating Peace, and it will be a more organized and a new program once again. It has never been the same thing so far, and we just keep on working and finding out what works. We keep finding out what works. So one tiny practical thing I want to share today. I'll be doing some webinars that'll be freestanding, and they're going to come in the next few weeks just so people can get a sense of a little more with Eating Peace. And at the end of the webinars, I'll share more specifically about the program, how it works, how you sign up for it, what to expect. But one little tiny thing is somebody asked me just today, I wish there was a payment plan. Because yes, it involves money, which I still don't like talking about. But it is a way that we all have an exchange. Really done a lot of work on money and trading money and being supported by it, and you'll be supported by it too. And yes, there's a one-time cost, and yes, you can split it up into payments. So I guess I just wanted to share that, since it feels like a little one of those things that just like, oh, do we have to talk about money? We kind of do. Do we have to talk about food and eating? Yeah, we kind of do. You have to talk about how you feel about your body, no matter what shape or size or weight it is. Yeah, we do. And what you've learned about food and eating, some of the same stuff about food and eating that's shameful is exactly the same as money. I want it. I don't want it. I'd like to freely give it, but I want to keep it. It's pleasurable to have it. It buys things that are pleasurable, on and on. It's the same type of thing. And so there is a trade here with how much time and energy and focus I have in the group and what's going on with this trade here that's called money. But you can make payments. So you can spread it out over 12 months and hopefully make payments that work for you. And makes it possible for you to be in the program and then return to the program, because I just keep on doing a new version all the time, but it just keeps getting better and better. So if you're still here, thanks for being here on this longer explanation today. And just the most important thing is, even if you never were ever going to take a program online, which I would certainly understand, some people like to do things in person, that you will access the things that you feel shamed about. Do a journaling piece today. Write down what you feel ashamed about in your life. And then you can begin to study them and get really curious about, I wonder why that's showing up. And the answer isn't because I'm a bad and horrible person. Because you aren't. You can't really be someone that's a bad and horrible person. This is just a flow of energy that seems to be doing it this way. So why would that be? What's going on here? There are ways to learn why and understand whatever your behavior is that's covering up other things that you'd rather not see, perhaps. So what are you keeping a secret from yourself that you don't want to share? What are you feeling that you'd rather not share? Get with other people. Get connected and talk with them. Intimacy and connection is the greatest medicine for any compulsion or addiction. Always. Lots of love, everybody.